Hello, I'm Africa 54 Managing Editor Vincent Makori in for hashtag the U Word. It's Wednesday, September 8th. This is Africa 54.
Guinea's opposition leader says he's open to participate in a transition following a coup. The school dropout rate in South Africa is soaring. We'll tell you what authorities are doing to stop it. And scientists say vaccines protect against long COVID. We'll explain.
Guinea's main opposition leaders say he is open to participating in a transitional government following a military coup as the soldiers who seized power consolidate their control. Libby Hogan reports.
The opposition party in Guinea signalled they are open to participate in the country's political transition, just a few days after the military staged a coup. The main opposition leader, Cellou Diallo, is a long-standing rival of deposed President Alpha Condé. On Tuesday, he spoke to Reuters about the political transition.
I have no objections. At the moment, I have not been invited, but I have said several times in the media that I was available, and I know that my partners are also ready to participate in a transitional government.
But so far, not many details have emerged about what that would look like. The elite unit that stormed Guinea's presidency and seized 83-year-old Condé on Sunday have promised to set up a transitional government, but have not given details of what form it would take or a time frame. Diallo said there was a need to establish a transition that would organise free and transparent elections and put in place legitimate and democratic institutions. Also on Tuesday, 80 political prisoners detained during the previous administration were released. People chanted in celebration at the prison gates. A number of prisoners who had protested against ousted President Condé's third term made up some of those being released. West African countries have threatened sanctions following the overthrow of Condé, who was serving a third term after altering the constitution to permit it.
Libby Hogan of Reuters fired that report. In a separate interview, opposition leader Cellou Diallo specifically told VOA he would not personally join a transitional government, but would designate members of his party to participate. The Democratic Republic of Congo's health minister says a meningitis outbreak in northeastern Tshopo province has killed 129 of the 267 people who have been infected since the first cases were discovered in June. The World Health Organization says tests carried out by the Institut Pasteur in Paris detected one of the most common types of bacteria, Neisseria meningitis, which has the potential to cause large epidemics. Meningitis often displays the symptoms of fever, headaches, stiff neck, and difficulty speaking. It can be transmitted by kissing, sneezing, or coughing on someone or living in close quarters with an infected person. Meningitis mainly affects children and young people. Now, South Africa's school dropout rate has tripled during the COVID pandemic. Educators and nonprofits are now racing to intervene and encourage youth to re-enroll. Linda Gevitesh reports from Johannesburg.
Cabello Ramwanye didn't return to his rural high school north of Pretoria when classrooms reopened after pandemic lockdowns. The 16-year-old got used to spending his days at home. With limited access to technology, online learning was impossible and he quickly fell behind. Child and youth care workers like Marie van Rooyen, who provide support to students at his school, say he's among many who felt too discouraged to come back.
It's hard for them to catch up. When I speak to the learners, they tell me that it's overwhelming. So some of them, they feel demotivated to come back to school or to come to school also. They're saying it's too much work. Yeah, because of the pandemic.
A national study on the effects of the pandemic in South Africa found that 500,000 students dropped out of school by May this year. That's compared to 230,000 dropouts in 2018. Not completing high school has long-lasting effects. Experts say not graduating increases children's likelihood to join gangs, use drugs, be abused, or become pregnant.
We know that learners who drop out of school before completing the final year of high school, known as matric here in South Africa, struggle to find decent jobs. Dropout isn't just the problem of the individual or the individual's family or community. Dropout is a problem that affects the country as a whole, as well as the economic health of the country.
South Africa's Zero Dropout campaign says just one adult taking interest in a child's education can turn things around. The Isibindi Ezekuleni program is doing just that by providing 29 schools with child and youth care workers. Care providers offer students educational and social support in class, at home, and during lockdowns by phone.
We also identify those who have dropped out, advocate for them at school, make sure that they are reintegrated, given support in terms of catching up. We also help them with the transition to adulthood in terms of assisting them in applying for tertiary and getting them into different programs.
Romanye was among the students identified by the program.
She's the one that told me that I must go back to the school. Yeah, that's why I did go back to the school.
The Zero Dropout campaign and its partners are calling on the government to launch a nationwide strategy to re-enroll and retain students. They also want to see better attendance record keeping so schools can track and trace absenteeism to identify at-risk students before they drop out. Linda Giftash for VOA News, Johannesburg.
In East Africa, Kenyan authorities say the economic impact of the COVID-19 pandemic is forcing thousands of youth onto the streets, and many are turning to crime. To meet the challenge, 8 groups are trying to reintegrate homeless youth through sports with the goal of keeping them out of trouble. Victoria Munga has more from Nairobi.
Anthony Ndegwa recalls the day he fled his volatile Nairobi home after ongoing domestic violence over low income. His mother was stabbed by his angry aunt.
I came back home from school. My mother and brother had gone to the hospital. I changed and left the house to join my friends on the streets. I was afraid my aunt would stab me too. Since then, I lived on the streets.
He's among hundreds of youth now off the streets thanks to 8 groups that are rehabilitating homeless youth through football. Shuba Wango says the program gives them a chance to gradually reintegrate street youth back to the society and get regular meals as the COVID-19 pandemic continues to disrupt livelihoods.
Most of them love sports, so we use that sport. We organize games so that those who want to play and are on the street are willing to leave everything else just so that they can play. And as a coach, I can't let them go back to the street after playing.
Scores of the homeless have been rescued from the streets under the Kenyan government rehabilitation program since May. The program aims to rescue at least 500 youth from the street.
There's someone who goes to the streets and talk to the children. Then we have a specific day of bringing them here. And now also bringing here, which means there are basic needs that they have to be given or to be provided. We have food, we have medication.
The program can only make a small dent in the larger problem. Nairobi has an estimated 60,000 street families, an increase from 15,000 before the pandemic. The number is likely to remain high until the Kenyan economy rebounds from the pandemic. Victoria Amunga for VOA News, Nairobi.
New research shows that coronavirus vaccines not only offer protection against infection and serious illness, but may also help prevent so-called long COVID, where symptoms can last for weeks or months. Henry Ridgwell reports from London.
South African factory manager Bradley Solomons caught COVID-19 in July last year and spent more than 20 days in hospital. Months later, he was still struggling with daily life.
I still feel that sometimes I lose my memory for 3 to 5 minutes and I don't know what I was doing or whatsoever, and I still cough. Now and then my throat is still sore.
There are no official figures, but it's thought millions of people worldwide who contracted the coronavirus have also suffered from so-called long COVID, with symptoms lasting longer than 4 weeks. The condition remains poorly understood, says British campaigner Ondine Sherwood.
amongst medical practitioners, there is a bit of variation in terms of recognition. I think people are still getting told that it's due to anxiety. Some doctors don't really fully understand this condition.
New research from King's College London suggests that coronavirus vaccines halve the risk of suffering from long COVID for the very low number of people who get infected after vaccination. The scientists base their research on Britain's Zoe COVID study app, which tracked the self-reported symptoms of 1.2 million people between December 2020 and July this year. 0.2% of vaccinated respondents reported being infected with coronavirus. Of those, 5% reported suffering from long COVID, compared to 11% of unvaccinated people.
So the vaccine will protect you from becoming ill from the virus. It will also protect you, if you do get symptoms, from becoming long-term ill from this virus.
The findings will fuel the debate over whether to offer vaccines to children. Another recent study in Britain found that 1 in 7 children suffers from long COVID 3 months after infection, with headaches and fatigue listed as the most common symptoms. Several countries, including the US, have already begun vaccination programs for those 12 years and over. Henry Ridgewell for VOA News, London.
2 small children were among the dozens of migrants rescued from the English Channel Tuesday. Witnesses saw 2 boats arrive at the headland of Dungeness in Kent, southeast England. On one boat, 2 men were each accompanied by a young child, according to Reuters. The migrants were carried by Royal National Lifeboat Institution vessels to a single beach, where they were met by police and border force officers who helped carry the children to shore. Now, the population of Uganda is just over 47 million people, according to the latest United Nations data. However, there is a housing shortage estimated at over 2.4 million units. Now, a Ugandan social entrepreneur is on a mission to provide a pathway to home ownership for low-income families. Africa 54 technology correspondent Paul Ndiho spoke to Anne Rayora, co-founder and CEO of Smart Heavens Africa, based in Kampala, Uganda, about the housing crunch.
And Rayora, welcome to Africa 54.
Thank you very much.
You run a social enterprise in Uganda. You are on a mission to empower millions of women to own their own homes. How did you get started?
Getting started was way back when I lost my father, and seeing how my mother had spent more than 50% of her income on ensuring that she pays for the home that we were staying in. That is after we lost our own home to our relatives. It was very difficult, and also meeting a co-founder who also lived even a worse housing situation. He was a street vendor, and putting all our problems together rather than sit back and complain, we saw there was an opportunity to help women like my mother not face the same challenge by providing an affordable, sustainable pathway towards home ownership.
How many houses have you built so far?
Since we started, we have been able to build 80 homes at the moment, and our core goal is to ensure that we establish harmonious communities in which people can ably live and have a decent life to live with their children.
When you talk to some of these women that you've empowered, helped to own a home, what are their stories?
I will recap from one of the women that is in our homes. She had a family with young girls growing up and living in a slum-like environment. Her children were never secure since this was an environment that had alcohol addicts, that had different situations that made her and her children uncomfortable to live in that situation. So getting us gave her a peaceful environment for her children to play, and she could comfortably be at our workplace with no worries.
How inexpensive or how expensive are your homes?
We have a rent-to-own housing model that helps low-income households afford these homes without further deepening their poverty. They are able to pay a monthly payment, roughly 520,000 Uganda shillings minimum on a monthly rate for a period of 5 to 8 years. And this monthly fee is always a contribution towards their ownership, towards the purchase of this house. But what is very unique with our homes is that you enter in the homes as soon as you start paying for it. When you complete your payment plan, we convert the titles to the household head and they become very independent.
Who inspires you?
I'm greatly inspired by my mother and seeing the challenges that she has overcome, seeing how she turned the challenges into opportunities to educate the 8 of us from my family. It wasn't a very small task, I could say. And this greatly inspires me to always look at challenges and create opportunities.
This is a very, very ambitious project. It requires you to have funds readily available for you to be able to do what you do. How are you able to pull this off?
We started with the little finances that we had, was able to attract other interested partners who align and believe in our overall mission of ending housing poverty in Africa, and also considering the revenues that we generate from the homes, from those who are already staying in the homes, keep helping us to build more and more homes.
And thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much.
That's remarkable. And that was Africa 54 technology correspondent Paul Diallo speaking to Anne Rayora, co-founder and CEO of Kampala-based Smart Havens Africa. Well, still to come, how advances in medicine and trauma care improved the survival rate of U.S. forces during the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq. But first, Haiti Adams tells us what's coming up on today's Straight Talk Africa.
Be sure to join me on the next Straight Talk Africa. We'll take you to the movies as internet streaming giants battle for top billing and online audiences across Africa. We ask who's winning and who's watching. We'll also look at the growing demand for homemade stories by Africans, for Africans, and about Africans. We'll have it all right here on the next Straight Talk Africa.
A greater share of U.S. soldiers survived the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq than those who fought in previous wars. Advances in medicine and new concepts about trauma care over the past 20 years have made the difference. VOA's Carol Pearson reports on the most dramatic advances.
There's a term military doctors use after a soldier receives a serious injury. It's called the golden hour.
You really have an hour to really fix a lot of these things, and if you can do as much as you can in the field, you can save a lot of people.
Military experts concluded that 80% of combat fatalities might have been prevented if bleeding could have been stopped. Progress has been made in that area.
We've developed bandages with clotting factors on them to put on the wounds, which were big advances.
My thumb is on the red. Push it open.
Training provided in a Stop the Bleed class teaches students how to apply a tourniquet in just seconds.
So there's the regular method where it takes about 30 seconds to put on a tourniquet. I'm going to show you how to do it within 10 to 12 seconds.
Quick action has saved lives on the battlefield and in civilian life.
I swing the tail end around.
With burns, survival rates have improved drastically. At one point, the percentage of people expected to live after a serious burn was 50%.
Well, now in the United States, that's 80%. It's 80, almost 90% in some cases. And so we have gotten a lot better with the critical care and the management and the wound closure of people with big burns, particularly in the military.
Another major advance is that trauma care was moved up to the front line, so treatment could be given almost immediately.
So we saw individuals that were much more severely injured than in the past, so they were surviving and getting to rehab and having multiple trauma, or what we called polytrauma, so head injuries, burns, amputations, fractures, the list would go on. And so the care was much more complex.
The complex nature of that care meant military doctors had to work in teams.
Even the rehabilitation teams expanded beyond the traditional therapists and rehab doctors to include the plastic surgeons, neurosurgeons, infectious disease doctors, all working as this huge team to kind of meet the needs of each individual veteran or service member that was going through rehabilitation.
There have also been advances in prosthetics.
Prosthetic hands used to just be either a hook or they could just open and close, and they'd have one degree of freedom, one thing they can control.
The goal now is to make these prosthetics act as much like the limb that was lost, including the ability to feel. At the Cleveland Clinic, a doctor has developed a prosthetic arm that contains a highly sophisticated computer that communicates the sense of touch with the wearer's brain.
They feel as though their hands are moving even though they don't have a hand, and they feel as though their fingers are touching things even though they don't have fingers. And the interesting thing about it is that when we put all of these systems together, their brains actually feel like the hand is human.
There's a long way to go in helping the injured return to civilian life with better prosthetics and burn treatment and good brain function.
Ready and go.
But the doctors who spoke to VOA say medical advances in their fields have come a long way in the past 20 years. Carol Pearson, VOA News, Washington.
In 2002, VOA's Ken Farabaugh, then a reporter for the U.S. military, visited Afghanistan in the early stages of America's 20-year presence in the country. As the United States ends its military engagement, Farabaugh follows up with some of the people he met in those early years to discuss the U.S. withdrawal and the legacy of their mission.
We're here at Kabul International Airport where
My first visit in 2002, reporting for the American Forces Network from the newly liberated capital city of Kabul, Afghanistan.
Top jump master.
Started in U.S. Army Major Patrick Flanagan's military Humvee as we departed Bagram Airfield. The 2-hour ride in a small convoy on a 60-kilometer stretch of highway cut through the remote countryside and brought Flanagan and his unit into contact with foreign troops, Northern Alliance fighters, and wary Afghan citizens.
I remember the first couple rides into Kabul, they say, oh, you're with the killers. And I'm like, the killers? They says, no, we're here to protect the city. You're here to kill the Al-Qaeda, the Taliban, the bad people.
That perception didn't meet the reality of this day's mission.
When the United States Army psychological operations teams go into stores like this one in Kabul, they've got several things in mind.
Our journey led us to Kabul's famed Chicken Street, where Flanagan's objective was to shop.
We're buying some school supplies, purchasing them to take them back up to our area in order for us to give them to the locals. And what we're going to do is give them to the local leaders in order to have them promote that, again, they're in charge of their schools and they want to take care of the pupils as well as the teachers that are working hard to support the education effort for Afghanistan.
Delivering school supplies along with leaflets and other material labeled with slogans and messages was part of Flanagan's U.S. Army Psychological Operations, or PSYOP mission.
It's the military's form of influence And it'd be like if you hired a marketing campaign to sell Coca-Cola.
Flanagan says the intent of PSYOP wasn't to mislead or indoctrinate, but to educate and protect.
It's not so much taking information, trying to use it for or against the population, but an appreciation, understanding of what they're going through, so we can use the themes and symbols and messages to better assist themselves as well as the coalition forces. Don't step on IEDs or report if there's an unexploded ordnance. So some of them was just to inform them because it could hurt them, and others is like, you know that the coalition, you shouldn't throw rocks at their trucks, or the coalition are friendly. So a whole series of messages designed to help them understand why we're here, so they wouldn't have someone else to answer that question for them that really didn't like us.
Today, remnants of Flanagan's PSYOP mission are stored in his rural Virginia basement.
This is many hands.
Memories of Afghanistan, where he lived and worked for a total of 2 years over multiple deployments, supporting a mission he sees today as incomplete.
And I think at times, because of some of our actions, we've hardened the people that don't like us. So I think it was polarizing, not to our effect for psychological operations, but I think it extenuated. People that were just living in the farms, working, they're like, okay, yeah, we like this, we're getting a little help. But then they were agitated by the Taliban, who say, we don't want you to help them. So they would think of new ways to cause havoc and chaos and pain.
Flanagan retired from the Army in 2011 and has spent time since working for a U.S. military contractor. Through his brother, former Illinois Congressman Michael Flanagan, now a Washington, D.C. consultant, he had opportunities to share his views on his time in Afghanistan with other legislators and policymakers.
I think we should have left a while ago. I think we overextended our stay.
Flanagan feels the U.S. achieved its goal of breaking up Osama bin Laden's terrorist operations in the country, but lost the effort to nation build in Afghanistan.
Hindsight's 20/20, but yes, I think we should have said, okay, he's done now. Where's Al-Qaeda? And let's have some sort of ramp off of the military can exit.
Now that the military is exiting, Flanagan wants a parade or celebration marking the return of U.S. forces back home.
Just to say thank you very much, and then when that's over, it kind of finalizes it and it's done. You can look back and say, okay, that's finished.
But Flanagan hopes to serve the public again. He is seeking opportunities to run for political office, where he hopes to use the experience he gained in Afghanistan while in uniform to shape future U.S. foreign policy. Kane Fairbaugh, VOA News, Front Royal, Virginia.
Well, and that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. From all of us in Washington, thanks for watching.